I saw that list, I was like, psychosis.
I guess we did have more discussion on cars.
Oh my God. It's fine, but those people have to be really monitored, you know, like if you have a serious diagnosis like psychosis, bipolar, schizophrenia, they have to be monitored because they don't have the mental capacity to remember to take their meds, to be adherent to a regimen. So I was like, I don't know if y'all ready.
It's not great for road trips, but I've been to Nashville a couple of times. Stop in Jackson.
Yeah.
Where's the water?
Plug in for 20 minutes.
Agenda. Hello, nice to meet you. Hello, how are you? Joy.
It had 40 when I bought it. I just drive back and forth to work.
I asked Brett about water, it might be my fault.
Out by the hill, drive about
10 or 12 miles. Yeah, what'll put the
Oh,
miles in a hurry is the family trip to Florida, et cetera. That's like.
And it's not a practical car to do that.
That's right.
And it has no back seat to speak of.
Right.
Hey, Brett, we ready?
I think so.
Okay. What'd you do? That was the purse gal. I'd like to call the meeting of the Landmarks Commission for February the 27th, 2020 to order. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Warren,
Present.
Ms. Strong,
Present.
Mr. Prosser,
Here?
Ms. Doss,
Present.
Ms. Boyd,
Here.
Vice Chair Tucker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Norcross?
Oh, Mr. Norcross, calling Mr. Norcross.
All right, thanks. The Landmarks Commission and the local historic district guidelines are established to ensure preservation of structures that are of historic value to Memphis. Our function is to preserve significant resources, enhance community pride, foster civic beauty, and ensure compatibility within the locally designated historic districts. The commission is authorized to review projects and determine their appropriateness based on each district's historic review guidelines. Mr. Secretary, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, item G1 will be a hold. The applicant is not in town, so we will hear it at the March meeting.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, will a member who has read the minutes from January the 23rd, 2020, make a motion for their approval?
I move to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
Second. May I have a roll call?
Ms. Strong,
Yes.
Mr. Prosser,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Ms. Boyd,
Yes.
Mr. Warren,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tucker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
He's just being left out all over.
all right.
That's okay.
Okay. I will now, that's okay. The minor certificates of appropriateness have already been reviewed and approved. We will now vote to accept. May I have a vote? Roll
Oh,
call.
actually,
Oh, we don't
we
have
did
to.
change that process, and I know that Chair Cox is not here today, so
Gotcha.
yes, we just have them on
So
the
we've
agenda.
accepted them.
Yes.
Okay. All right, for the major COAs, we will now hold public hearings on each of the applications for major certificates of appropriateness. For each case, I will first swear all parties in who wish to speak on the matter. We will then hear testimony from the applicant, followed by those in support of the application, and then finally those in opposition to the application. After opposition has spoken, the applicant will be allowed a rebuttal period. If you would like to provide testimony to the commission and you are not an applicant, please fill out some speakers cards, so we will have, make time for you in the minutes. Okay, the first case is, okay, that's on hold. Do I read the on hold one?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, MLC number 20008, 1742 Foster Avenue. Is the applicant here? Could you come forward? Okay, could you state your name and address for the record?
Spencer Shadrack, 3526 Highland Park Place.
Okay, thank you. Would you hold your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Have you read the staff report?
I have.
Are you in agreement with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone here want to see the staff report?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Who is the,
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brian Box is the Office of Planning and Development Landmark Section. This is a COA for a new construction for a one-story single-family home in the Glenview Historic District. The applicant is building on a vacant lot that's in the R6 Historic District. It's much larger than the R6 district zoning. We're recommending approval of this application for a one-story home at this location that meets the setbacks in the area. It also meets the spacing along the street as well as the setback and rhythm along the block. The site plan, as indicated on the graphic or on the overhead, it shows that the house will have a 40-foot setback from the edge of the front porch, and this will align with the front porch of houses adjacent to the property. The drive, we are recommending that the drive be extended beyond the front, the side porch, to extend to the rear of the home to allow for an additional parking space. And I believe that condition is in our recommendations. Oops, what did I do here? This is the front elevation of the home. As you can see, it's a full width front porch with 4 box columns and also 3 vertical 3/1 front windows. During executive session, Mr. Shadrack, we recommended that the side left and right side elevations windows match the front elevations or vice versa. So we're recommending those windows remain consistent throughout the structure. That's one change, the only change we recommended in the executive session. This house is parallel to Foster Avenue. It also has a shed roof full width front porch with a roof dormer, a gable dormer with fixed 4 light windows. This elevation we believe is consistent with the other designs within the area. As you can see, the east elevation or right side elevation, and there are no windows at the front of the house at this elevation, but there are windows on the left side elevation at the front. So it's 4/1, as you can tell here, a double set of 4/1 double hung windows. So does it meet the guidelines with public streetscape, private yard, and building orientation? We believe it does. And as far as parking, fencing, building mass and scale, we believe it does. There are no fences planned at this time. The applicant has also provided building materials, architectural elements, and details of windows and doors in the plan, and we believe it meets the guidelines with those 2 exceptions. We're recommending approval with 4 conditions, and those conditions are listed on the screen. They're also included in your staff report, I believe on page 8. That's all I have, Madam Chairman. We did not receive any emails or phone calls in opposition.
okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the commission?
Page 10, I'm sorry.
Only question I have relates to windows. I agree that they ought to match front to side. And I guess, I think we ought to, I think the proposal with the vertical 3 certainly matches the front door. If we're going to change to 4/1, then the front door really would look out of place with that verticality of the panels, and I guess the windows above at the top. Are those windows at the top of the door? Or is that a panel at the top of the door? Okay. So I would suggest that you use the 3/1 design on the sides as well, at least at where they're visible from the street.
The vertical 3/1.
The vertical 3/1.
Okay.
And also to add a set of windows on the right side elevation toward the front. And not have that big expansive wall without a window at the front.
Right here.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Is that a bedroom?
That's what I was
Is
gonna
that
say.
a living room?
A bedroom or living room on that side?
Dining room.
Dining room.
I'm sorry, living room. You're right, living room. So, yeah, there's no fireplace, so, yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I think it's a great plan. And then
It always
be a
jumps
good-
out at me, but the column and beam is not right from the front of it.
Too wide?
See, no, it's, do the front view. And those the two beams, the column goes beyond it at the top. It needs to align with the column below.
Say that again, Mr.
See the column cap,
Yes.
it ought to have a piece of metal there to keep water from going down into the column, because the column is gonna be a piece of wood probably. And, it doesn't align with the beam across it.
The column should be
The column,
outset.
the edge of the
Right.
column and the edge of the beam ought to be the same, and then the flare goes out beyond that.
So
And
the,
it's a little off.
yeah,
Follow what you're saying.
That's, just look at the historic book and it'll be real clear.
Natasha, did you hear something?
I had a question about your side entrance, because you have a side entrance instead of a rear entrance. So my question was sort of, it's that one.
There.
Yes. A little more detail on what you plan to do with that?
I believe it's gonna be a small enclosed patio for quickly into the, instead of, if the driveway is extended that far into the property, it's gonna be difficult to walk around the front of the property, so entering inside right there is, well,
You go into the kitchen?
that goes into the kitchen and
Okay.
mudroom, I believe.
The house next to it is the same, exact
Fine with the
same.
side entrance, you just didn't have details on sort of what it would look like. Because you don't have a back entrance or rear entrance. So I just had a question about that.
Yeah.
Since it was a new build.
What would it look like?
Yes. Sort of, are you gonna have like a porch overhang or covering, or is it just going to sort of be recessed back?
Yeah,
Or how is
I believe the plans call for maybe a
Yeah.
3-foot inset,
Yeah, all alcove inside, yeah.
maybe a 3-by-5 enclosed porch, looks like, with a standard exterior door entry.
Okay. There any other questions from the commission?
Can you, well, first, did we say the roof line is the same as the house next to it, or the two house? There's one house, the farmhouse on the left, and the other house under construction on the right side of it. Is the roof line the same?
Are they the same height?
Because a lot of the streets particularly, a lot of the homes particularly on the block are single story or with the finished attic and basement and stuff like that. So is it in line with that is the only home left that is two-story?
The house to the left is a 2-story.
The farmhouse.
Home. It's has a basement and it has I believe a finished attic. And I
Which
believe
one
that
are you talking about, the farmhouse or the one that's under construction?
The one's under construction.
Oh, okay.
And that one actually has a covered porch that has windows. I believe it has a front gable as well. And the architect that worked with me on this, Gardo, he designed the plan consistent with another plan that was approved on Netherwood, I believe last year. So to my knowledge, he designed that to be similar to the neighborhood, but I can't tell you exactly what the height was compared to the property next door.
Okay, and can you tell me again about the porch? Please, I can't read that. So can you tell me again about the porch? I know
I believe the porch is the width of the property. or the width of the
Side
front
porch or
gable.
the front?
The
Side
front
porch?
porch,
Front porch or the side porch?
front porch.
Side porch?
Front porch?
Okay.
I believe it's gonna be even with the foundation, so this 24 inches off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's 8 feet deep.
That was the question, the depth of the porch,
I
8
believe
feet.
so.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there anyone, do we have any cards? Is there anyone here that would like to speak either in favor or against this project? Okay. Okay, can I call for a motion?
Madam Chair, I believe there were some conditions that we wanted to add to that motion, so I have some of those, and
Okay.
I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion to those, with those conditions, or you could actually add those.
What are they, Brad?
We want all the windows to match, and I think we ended on saying that they should all be 3/1. I don't know if we still want to give the flexibility to they all match, just, to make sure that they can get the windows that they need in the different locations, but that would be an option for you to make the motion. And then add a window on the east side, I believe, in the living room. And then revise the porch columns to have the top cap extend beyond the beam. So those are the three that I had.
I'd move approval with the existing staff recommendations or conditions, along with 3 additional ones to have the windows in the front and in the first third of the sides to be the same and be 3/1, like they're shown on the current plan. To add a set of windows on I think it's the right elevation,
The east.
and to near the front, and to ensure that the porch columns are set. How would I describe that?
The top cap would extend beyond the beam.
The top cap would extend beyond the beam.
There's a second?
Second.
Call?
You want to ask for any discussion between you all?
Was
We
there
can
any
do that.
discussion? Figured we had it all.
Include the rear too. The rear,
Well, you can't see the rear from the street, so it's really not.
they can be consistent. I know. Okay.
So if there is any discussion after a motion and a second, you can have it. I don't think there maybe needs to be, but yes, okay. So I'll do a roll call. Okay. Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Prosser?
Yes.
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Ms. Boyd?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tucker?
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. And you can, of course, get with staff to clarify what was discussed up here. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next case, MLC 20009, 621 South Willett Street. Is the applicant here? Thank you. Would you state your name and address?
Sure, Eric Clausen, 621 South Willett.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Have you seen the report?
Yes, I have.
And are you in agreement?
Yeah, the only thing, I had one slight clarification I wanted to present.
Okay.
I was going to see if I could.
Madam Chair, Mr. Secretary, I don't know at what point it would be appropriate for me to recuse myself from this case.
Yes, I think this would be the point, so we'll notice
Mr.
Commissioner
Clausen
Warren.
Mr. Clausen is a current client of mine.
Yes.
Okay. All right, do we need to see a staff report?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brian Barkers, the Office of Planning and Development again with.
Oh, Brian, I think she was asking if we do need to, I think, so.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not-
sorry.
Yeah.
Is my microphone extra loud?
And I'd like to see it.
I know we did see one before, but, okay.
You
Okay.
want to continue? Again, thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a COA that for 621 South Willett, for a property that we heard a COA for an accessory dwelling unit garage on last month. The applicant is back before you this time to request site improvements for new brick columns, wrought iron, and metal fencing. It also includes pedestrian and vehicular gates, a private drive and parking, and a courtyard to the south side of the home along the public alley. Views from South Willett, these are views that were taken in January 2020, so these shrubs have been taken out along the front. This is the Harbert Avenue alley. The mature trees in the front, in the southeast corner of the yard will remain. This is another view along the Harbert Avenue side. This is the side yard where you can see the porte-cochere. The main drive is off of Harbert Avenue. It circles into the property under the porte-cochere and into the rear yard of the home. You can see the accessory dwelling unit that was under construction and is being modified as we speak. To the lower right, there's a photo of the pedestrian way that leads to the main street off of Harbert Avenue. And you can also see the accessory dwelling unit garage building that's under construction that was heard last month. This is the survey of the property. As you can see, the existing home, as well as the accessory dwelling unit garage building. The conditions on the survey are pretty adequate as they are on the ground today. As stated, the primary drive is off of Harbert Avenue. It circles into the porte-cochere, into the rear yard, as well as a pedestrian way that leads to Harbert Avenue, and also the primary pedestrian way that leads from South Willett. You also have a 15-foot wide 15-foot wide public alley, which is Harbert Alley, that leads to the garage to the rear of the property. The access to this area will be modified to include the vehicle access gates, as well as a courtyard on the south side. And along the front, the existing brick wall that you see here of the retaining wall will remain, with columns along this side, along the street side, and also to include additional columns similar in height to match the columns that exist today, as well as modifications to the front yard to allow for fencing in the front yard with columns as well. The site plan, as you can see, this is north is down, so just pay attention to the primary location of the property. Harbert Avenue is to the south. I'm going to say south on this site plan, but it's actually north. So as you can see, this is the pedestrian way that leads to the rear yard. There will be pedestrian gates here. Also, the installation of new columns along that will taper from the rear side yard to the front side yard. And there are existing columns along the private drive that leads from Harbert Avenue, and there are also existing columns at the pedestrian side to Harbert Avenue, as well as South Willett. The new columns will be installed to accent the existing columns along Harbert, and also new columns will be installed with wrought iron fencing along South Willett, as well as the Harbert Avenue alley. As you can see, the new courtyard area will be to the south side of the home. Will also include perimeter fencing to enclose this rear yard area. Also, a vehicle access gate will lead directly to the accessory garage structure, and it will lead into the private drive area to include new parking and turnaround space. These are fence elevations. This is the Harbert Avenue elevation. As you can see, this is a pedestrian gate, as well as the existing retaining walls along Harbert Avenue to include picket fences and also brick columns. As you can see, the lower graphic shows this is a larger view of this area. Is a larger view. This is a larger view of this area that's circled. here, and the columns will taper from front to back. They will also include the existing retaining wall that's along Harbert Avenue. This is the fence elevation and pedestrian gates along South Willett Street. This is the original plan, and I think the modifications that the applicant, revisions the applicant is proposing has been handed out to you, and we're in agreement with the revisions as submitted as submitted today. The fence and vehicular gate details along Harbert. This is the Harbert Avenue Drive gate. This is the existing drive. The new gate will be installed at this location, as well as the existing columns will remain. Fence and secondary pedestrian gate and details. This is the pedestrian gates off of Harbert Avenue. This is the area that I showed you that leads to the Harbert Avenue street side. Fence and vehicular gate details along Harbert Alley. They will be similar in size and width and height as the gates along the Harbert Avenue Drive, Harbert Avenue side, street side. Does the project meet the guidelines? We believe it does with fences and walls section of the design guidelines for Central Gardens. The visual connection between the street and the front yard will be maintained by using fencing material that's visually appropriate. There are other historic examples in the area that's directly across from and down the street from this property. The appropriate materials are being used for wrought iron brick columns and tubular steel, fencing and gates, including intermediate wrought iron pickets. The fencing along the street, both streets, is appropriate to the size of the lot, which is an estate-sized lot compatible in height and materials. And the existing retaining wall will not be disturbed and remain at existing height to retain the soil. Parking, the new parking and turnaround area is located in the rear yard and will be screened with landscaping and fencing. And the existing drive will not be disturbed and remain in its present form and with material. No new private drives are proposed at this time. The existing front walkway will not be disturbed and will remain in its present form with material that leads directly to the front door of the home. And the existing front walkway would not be disturbed. The new public sidewalks were installed by the applicant. They are consistent with other sidewalks on the block. And the new fencing, the new courtyard area on Harbert Alley side will be enclosed with fencing and will not be seen from the public street. We're recommending approval of this application. We did not hear from we did not receive any emails or opposition to the case. However, we did receive comments from the Central Gardens Historic Design Committee, and those design committee comments are included in your packet. They were mainly concerned with the setback of the fence and the height of the columns. Madam Chairman, that's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions of the applicant or staff?
I guess I do. First of all, I think it's a handsome plan. I mean, it's very, it's a beautiful house, and what you're proposing is very nice, with one issue I have, and that's the front gate, the gate that leads from the sidewalk up to the front of the home. It seems too big. It seems designed to separate the house from the street, and front yard fences are disfavored in Central Gardens. I realize that there are other front yard fences there, and I realize that you're dealing with a larger lot. But if you turn to that's the side gate, right?
That's the front gate.
That's the front? Okay. It's taller than the fencing adjacent to it, and it just seems to project separation when the goal is to not separate the house so totally from the street. So I I don't think that there's a problem having a gate there and a double gate like that, but I think the gate ought to be lower and in line with the other fencing, so that it doesn't put its hand up as a stop sign as opposed to just being part of the overall design of the wall. And other than that, on the side, that's not a problem. I mean, I realize you have a similar type of gate proposed there, but that's a side entrance. It's a garden entrance. It's not it's not how the house addresses itself to the street. And the guidelines say that the visual connection between the front yard and the street should be maintained, and I think that a gate of that size and height violates that guideline. So except for that, I think it's a great project, and I compliment you on it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the gates actually, I bought these. These are actually, I bought a pair of 1920s gates that came off of a mansion in Florida and had them shipped up, with the idea being that I thought that they would be would basically be appropriate to a similar sort of they were at a home like this down in Florida, and I thought it would be appropriate. The existing, I guess the existing brickwork, that sort of brickwork spacing is actually there right now.
Right.
And I think what we were, the one thing, I guess maybe I should back up. The one sort of revision or sort of thing I just wanted clarification I wanted to just make was that when we started to get some of the civil engineering people, that the land is actually like kind of at a slope, and so in order to maintain a level fence, you'd have to have the brick at one end would have to be taller than the brick at the other end. And so what we were saying was that at the corner of Harbert and Willett, that if you were say the sidewalk to the top of the fence level is going to be higher than the sidewalk to the fence level at the alleyway on Willett. So that was one point. Just wanted to highlight and just explicitly make sure that was understood.
How tall will that be?
Well, basically what we put in here is not to be more than 5 feet tall. And according to Central Gardens guidelines, basically for estate-sized lots, it says that front fences should be no more than 6 feet tall. Right. So we're still, I don't want a 6-foot fence. I think that wouldn't be appropriate. But I also don't want to have a fence where it's, super, it looks kind of weird where the ground
down, right?
Yeah, is sloping.
The gate here, is it attaching at the front of the piers, or is it attaching at the second set of piers?
The idea was to attach it to the second set of piers, so it'd actually be kind of like a little inset.
Mr. Prosser? Yeah. I just want to call your attention to the site plan. It shows that on the site plan where the gates are set back from the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. At this location. And he also included a handout where the gates and the columns are the same height. And I don't know if that makes any difference.
Certainly the design doesn't show that, and I could never find anywhere where the height of the gates were called out. In fact, I found the paperwork very frustrating to read because it was very hard to figure heights.
But I just wanted to point that out to you since you didn't see that on the plan.
Well, but this what we just received, the gates are taller than the piers.
Well, in the staff report, the gates were taller than the piers as well.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
So I think the gates should be no higher than the fencing that's within the piers, is my point.
Columns.
Right. No higher than the columns are a few inches taller than the fencing between the piers, and the gate ought to be no taller than the fencing. Not the pier, but the fencing.
I got you. Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the differential is between, did we say that? The differential between the gates and the fence?
I would say no more than 6 inches.
Oh, okay.
Appear to be.
It's 2 foot 4 inches arch. I mean, it's only. I think the design looks really nice.
Yeah, I do too. I
And
mean,
I think it's, it balances that whole area.
I think 6 inches, if that's the differential, is negligible. So I'd be inclined to, I wouldn't be as concerned, I wouldn't be concerned about it. Also, looking at this, handy chart, I'm assuming this reeks of Peter with this detail. Thank you, Peter. This seems like your handiwork. Thank you.
He can't speak, he's recusing himself.
Hmm?
He can't speak, he's
You can't
recusing
speak, well,
himself.
thank you. So this is very helpful though, because it gives you a comparison of the homes on the street, and they seem to be comparable, if not higher in total height. So, I mean, which, that's not the gates, but just in terms of the fence, the wrought iron and the brick. So I'd be inclined to vote yes, as is.
Is there any other discussion or questions from commissioners? Are there any cards? Anybody, if anyone would like to talk in favor or against this project? Come forward. You want to do?
Yeah, we can come to the podium and we need to swear you in. And
Sorry. Name and address.
Debbie Havener, 705 South McLean Boulevard.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God. Go ahead.
I didn't understand, I couldn't hear very well, but what is the actual height in front of the gate? I'd like to know that. Because I was thinking that we've gone up to 5 feet for the gate, and I was wondering if that's what the,
The columns are showing 5,
5.
and then there's, the arch goes a little above 5.
so what is a little above 5?
Did you see that?
You would
said
have to
about
look at that
6
arch.
inches?
It looks like it's about,
You're looking at that new drawing, right?
mhm.
5 feet
You said about 6
from
inches?
here
6 inches.
and about 6
Yeah, they're
inches
two
from
four,
that to
four
that.
wide.
And
so
and it looks like it's a, like filigree. I mean, it's light,
Mhm.
is it not?
Yeah, you see through that.
Yeah.
So it's half a foot
Mhm.
higher than the fence?
If
Roughly.
that.
It's just an arch.
Are you good? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'll call for a vote if there's no more discussion.
Yeah, a motion, we need to have a motion.
Motion.
Make a motion to approve the
Second,
design.
second.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, now we'll call for a vote.
All right. Ms. Strong,
Yes.
Ms. Boyd,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Prosser,
Yes.
Mr. Norcross,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tucker,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was Willett. Okay, the next is MLC 20010, 669 South Belvedere Boulevard, Central Gardens Historic District. Would the applicant please come forward? Okay, could you state both of your names individually?
Alyssa Johnston,
Go ahead.
Zachary Johnston.
Okay, and your address?
669 South Belvedere.
Okay, can y'all hear her?
I think it's, can you hear me now?
Is it might not be working right.
This is fine. Can you hear me now?
It's not working right.
I can talk louder. Is this better? Can you hear? Oh, we're
Well, they can't, yeah, you're just recording it too.
Testing 1, 2.
Do we need a battery? Do any of these work that they can?
Jeffrey, does this thing work?
Hello.
Well, they could come up this way and use this.
Oh, the other mics.
They have to.
I guess we could have the applicants
Yeah.
down at their,
I think that,
It's us noise, but it doesn't project, so.
oh, okay. Well, I believe what our AV master over here has just told us, that the one at the podium does pick up the voices, so we'll be recording it.
But we
It
would
just
hear
doesn't project. So if, I think the room is small enough and a few enough people, maybe we can use that. Well, I think Brian's got it set up anyway, so,
okay.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Did anybody get the names? Do you want to do the names, or are we good?
Yeah, we need to,
Okay. We're good?
no, yeah, we did swear them in. Yes,
Yeah.
we're good.
Okay. Now, have y'all seen the staff report?
Yes, we have. Yes.
Okay, well, are you in agreement? Because there's not, we have to talk about this more, I think.
Correct. We did not make a recommendation. We presented the
Right.
material, and then we're leaving it to the commission to
Okay, and
make a decision.
does the staff want, commission want to see the presentation? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item before you is a COA application for exterior alterations to allow painting an unpainted brick exterior of a structure in Central Gardens Historic District. Subject property is a contributing two-story neoclassical house built in early 20th century. The house currently has red brick exterior, gabled roof with asphalt shingles, and a two-story high portico with ionic columns. These photos were submitted by the applicant, illustrating the existing conditions of the brick exterior. The applicant is requesting a COA to paint the exterior of the house in order to remediate these issues. Central Gardens design guidelines state that it is preferred that the original brick exteriors to be maintained and not painted. And it also adds, if painted, the preference is to maintain the same color as the original brick. As you can see on the projection, the applicant proposes to paint the exterior in a shade of white. You can also see the color scheme in your staff reports. Because the language in the design guidelines allows some flexibility on this matter, we refrained from making any recommendations to the commission. However, we would like to remind that painting the exterior is an irreversible step, which does not necessarily fix the issues that the applicant showed in the pictures that they provided. We also would like to point out that some of the original details, such as the limestone keystones above the first floor windows, the limestone band across the second floor level around the house, and the alternating bricklaying styles will become unrecognizable if painted. So this concludes my staff report, and I will be happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you want to start? Let's start at one end on this. Peter, do you have any?
I'm still sort of flipping, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
I'd like to hear more of what the applicant has to say before I have any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe we can allow the applicant a chance to present their case.
Okay. Well, that was just a few of the pictures that we submitted, but the brick and the mortar is very damaged. We're gonna do a lot of brick repair before, so that will be corrected. We're not saying just painting it is gonna fix it, but we do think, it just doesn't look very nice right now. We do think that painting it would make it look nicer. We're also wanting to keep it very historically accurate. A lot of these homes that were antebellum style, the Georgian style, federal, they're mainly painted white. So that's why we chose this color. We would be fine to keep the limestone unpainted if that was frowned upon. I don't have a problem with that. So I don't know what other questions you guys have.
Well, and I also wanted to say, she pointed to C from the guidelines, but just prior to that, in section B, it says that bricks should be similar in characteristics, including color, texture, and size, to that found in historic houses of a similar style in the district. And within 2 blocks, there are 8 other homes that are painted white brick of our home. And when we considered purchasing this home, which had been for sale for quite a number of years, because I think a lot of people didn't want to put the amount of work that was necessary into it to make it a beautiful home and to maintain it, that was always in our plans. It was in our dreams for the home for our family. And it just seemed like, why would our house not be able to be painted in the same color that all of these other houses on the same street and in the same neighborhood are? Like, why would we be discriminated against? I didn't understand why it would be an issue in this Central Gardens neighborhood.
And the wording also, you know, it just says preferred and recommended. That doesn't seem very 100%.
Well, it's clear that wording's not 100%, that's why we're having the discussion. So it's interesting, the evolution of this guideline. I'm looking at an older copy. I don't know, maybe Ms. Havner knows what year this was updated. Was it last year, 2019? And we have to go by the new version, which is cited in the staff report, and it uses the language of preferred. It is preferred that original brick of the historic home be maintained and not painted. And it goes on to say, however, if painted, the preference is to maintain the same color as the original brick. It's an odd statement, but it's another layer to the discussion that we can't forget. The older guideline before 2019 says masonry shall not be painted, and it's in bold. That's under stone, stucco, brick, painted wood siding, and painted shingles are appropriate materials for new construction. Masonry shall not be painted unless matching brick is a problem due to a fire or act of God. Now, I'm not going to put much credence in it. You know, I'm an architect and I have building codes and they get updated and I pretty much can't look back at them right. Personally, it is unfortunate that there's a subjective nature to this, and I suppose you can, I guess you can tell where I'm going with this. Personally, I'm not in favor of painting unpainted brick. And you can say that's not fair, and that be your perspective, but from my perspective, I'm put up here with a guideline that expresses a preference. And it's an entirely subjective decision whether you want to paint it and what color you want to paint it. If you do want to paint it and we grant that permission, then we have to allow you to go against the second preference to paint it red, which admittedly would be an odd decision to spend money, but you're in a situation on that side, and as am I. There, you know, why should I go against the stated preference of the district guidelines? And we really can't do the forensics of the neighbor 3 doors over was painted in this year, you know, the district existed or it didn't exist, or, you know, we can't get into that, in my estimation, that kind of forensics and logic of why those decisions were made at that time. That's a slippery slope for me. So I don't know. I don't enjoy this at all, but I ask the commission to respect the stated preference of the guideline. Unfortunately, you know, that's where I stand on it.
Okay, Neil, you have any?
I guess I have a question about how you're going to solve the underlying problems. I mean, if you're going to solve the underlying problems and then paint it, it seems, first of all, I question whether that will happen, but if it does, then why should you paint it after the problems have been solved? This house has been there for 100 years as a brick house, and it was built to be a brick house, and the purpose of the guidelines is to conserve the properties and to try to keep them in form that they were built in. So I have a bias toward not painting it, and I wonder that, I worry that simply painting it's not going to solve the problems that caused the issues in the first place. The pictures here that are included in the staff report, the one picture shows a bad case of tuck pointing, which certainly can be corrected, and then some effervescence, I guess, toward the top, which I think can be corrected. The second picture just shows some missing mortar that would be easy enough to fix, and that's not a serious problem at all. The brick looks dirty, but you can wash it without harming it. And so, again, my bias is to leave it as it is, unless there's some compelling reason not to.
Yes, I would ask if our contractor Archer could
We'll ask him to come up.
Okay,
in a minute.
well, I'm not sure what it's gonna look like after we make those repairs.
Well, I would simply say, again, that this house sat for sale at reasonable prices for 3 years. And I think you have to ask yourselves why. Because it was not aesthetic. It didn't look good. Nobody wanted to live there. And the price kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And we want to improve upon the aesthetic, maintain the integrity of the house, but make it more appealing visually to everyone. I think there's a reason it wasn't selling, and you can say, well, we want to preserve, exactly what it's looked like for 100 years. But I mean, as human beings, none of us do that. We change our looks, even though we're in the same body and we've aged to whatever years. And again, all of these houses, and we bought this house in 2019. These guidelines were changed the same year. We weren't aware of this when we bought the house. We looked at the surrounding area, again, on the same street, within, left and right, everywhere there were white painted brick houses. And so that's why we thought, we'll take this house that's in disrepair that nobody seems to want, and we'll do what other houses have done to improve their looks in this neighborhood, this very same historic neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to state that the guideline was more restrictive against painting when you bought the house. And I don't want anyone to confuse that they bought the house and it changed
Before.
against them. It actually is more forgiving.
Okay.
Correct.
Are you,
Yeah.
okay. Felicia, did you have anything? Okay. Anyone?
Well,
Ms.
sure.
Marshall?
Well, so it was more forgiving, but then all of the house, he gave me permission, excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Mm-mm. Did you want to? Did y'all have any other? At this point, you can answer his question if you want to pose any questions to them.
Yeah, I believe Commissioner Warren was going to clarify, and I can clarify, the guidelines when the house was purchased were actually more restrictive against painting brick. And so the change, and I can give you the evolution of the change because it was a house that came before this body on Central. It was in the 1900 block, I think. And it had been purchased, and there was a lot of disrepaired brick that they had patched, and that was a certain condition. I think that the guidelines were, they evolved to try to allow some flexibility for those conditions. Those were extreme conditions, I would say. So the guidelines were less restrictive in the revision to allow flexibility. The intention was to not paint brick as the original guideline said, but if there were extenuating circumstances or conditions, that this body could review those.
Thank you. Did you have any further comment right now?
Well, just a response to his point that they were more restrictive when I purchased the house. Again, if they're more restrictive when I purchased the house and all of the houses under these more restrictive conditions surrounding it have been allowed to be painted, again, why discriminate against us? Especially now that they're more flexible because the wording isn't 100%, as Mr. Warren has already stated.
My response to that is past jurors, if we're jurors up here, I can't, again, there's a complicated forensics to that. I suspect that it has to do with personalities of people up here. I'm speaking for myself. I'm reading a preference. I have a neighborhood that stands behind this guidance document, and I can simultaneously have empathy with your position that it doesn't seem fair, that you personally want to see paint on the house. But I'm, for me, it's stated twice, a preference not to paint it, a preference to paint it the color of the brick. So to ultimately achieve what you're requesting, there's two preferences that we would be casting to the side.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, may I speak to one point of this? Is as staff, we do look at surrounding context and houses, and I think that there's a lot of discussion about how many houses and how close, and we can go on Google Earth, we can drive around. The majority of the homes in Central Gardens that are brick or masonry are not painted. On Belvedere, there are maybe, so I don't know exactly the ones, but there are many examples, a greater percentage of examples that are not painted. And so that's what we look at as well when we make our report. And again, we didn't make a recommendation, but we obviously have an opinion on what the effects of painted brick can be, not only aesthetically, but just also just on the maintenance and upkeep. And
Okay, thank you. Now, at this time, we need to see if we have someone that wants to speak in support. Mr. Archer, would you come forward? And you'll have to share that microphone.
Thanks for hearing our,
Okay, could you state your name and address?
yes, Tom Archer, Archer Custom Builders, 431 South Main Street, Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, could you raise your right hand? You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, take a seat.
I've done a lot of these homes over the years. I cut my teeth in Midtown in the 72 I started, so I've seen all different kinds of homes and different renovations. I've had the privilege and joy of working on many fine homes. Recently we did the 19th Century Club with the National Park Service. So as I walk through with my customers, of course, I try to figure out where they want to go and as they're the customer, they're the boss for me. But I know that I drove around the neighborhood and took pictures. Within 2 blocks, there's a couple dozen painted brick homes. And I took pictures of probably 15 of them, and I have more pictures. So, first of all, it's a young family. They moved into the neighborhood. They're trying to make the house their own and become a very integral part of the neighborhood. Their children go to school at Grace St. Luke's. He's a dentist, and his office is at Madison and Belvedere. So he makes his living there. And they've now purchased this home. They're coming in from another location. So they're really invested heavily in this neighborhood. In my opinion, it would be I know that 5 people have assigned on to this from the neighborhood close by saying they want them to be able to paint their home, and there's been no complaints through the mailers we've sent out. So we have 5 in favor, 0 against. These kids want to make it their home. It makes a lot of difference to them, and the neighborhood's supporting them, and I don't think anyone will make a hill of beans in 2 years to anyone else. I know about brick. We've laid millions of them over. I'm 65. But this thing is a big deal to them. They're good kids. They're in the neighborhood to stay. They've invested heavily, business, schools, big home. I think it would be gracious to let them do this, and I think it would be beautiful. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do the commissioners have any, wait 1 second. Does anyone want to ask Mr. Archer any questions? Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Catherine Schwartz. Okay. State your name and address.
Catherine Schwartz, 644 South Belvedere.
Okay. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I live across the street, and as a neighbor, we were waiting for years for someone to come up and purchase the home and fix it. And I don't see a problem with them being allowed to make the home their own and paint it however they desire. We would be all right with looking at it. There are plenty of other houses that I think have had paint jobs done, it's been white brick very recently, within the last few months, and there was no problem there apparently either, so,
Okay, thank you.
thanks.
Okay. Any other in support? Okay, we have Ms. Havner in opposition. Name and address.
Debbie Havner, 705 South McLean Boulevard.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
As far as this home, it is a beautiful home, and I don't think that it sat on the lot for not being on, no one buying it because it's of its looks. I think it's older home, and I think the inside was dated, and from what I've been told, that was really mainly the point. But the house itself is very beautiful, and I'm really glad that we have somebody that's moved into the neighborhood and into this home. Our guidelines do prefer that original historical homes in Central Gardens not be painted. And when we say that we prefer, that means we prefer. It means that we think that they shouldn't be painted. And so that's where I am coming from as chairman of the Central Gardens Guidelines and Architectural Committee, that we prefer that they not paint it. And after looking at the photos, our person, Margot Payne, who's really a good historical person, used to be with the Historical Society, knows all about windows and brick and mortar and has a degree in this. And she looked at it and she said that if they painted it and they didn't do due diligence on making the brick able to take the paint, it would still harm it even more. And so that's what I am worried about, is because it really does need a lot of work. And tuck pointing would be our preference for them to do that instead of painting. I think historic brick is a breathable material, and sealing one side with paint would trap additional moisture in there and salts and would cause further damage over time. And I would like to see this house saved. There are lots of resources here in Memphis, that people that do really good jobs on this, I've been told. And I think they could get help with that easily and have a beautiful home without having to paint it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions from the commission? Okay, call for a motion.
Rebuttal.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay. Then, did y'all want to come up and? Just if you wanted to comment on anything that was said.
Hearing her concerns on not painting it because it wouldn't be healthy for the house, the wording says it would be suggested that we paint it the brick color. I don't understand why painting it red would be okay, but painting it white would not be.
A good question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with that. To me, the main question is, should you paint it or not?
Period.
Yeah, and I haven't heard any compelling reason to paint it. The house is I think you'll find that if you simply paint the trim and have it one color instead of two, you'll find that the house looks very, very different. And the brick is handsome. It's been there for 100 years. The guidelines state a preference to preserve the property the way it's been, and once it's painted, you can't undo it. It'll always be that way. Everyone, every other owner from time immemorial will have to paint the house and keep it painted. And I think the house should be preserved the way it is. And I applaud you for the investment you've made in the neighborhood and supporting the schools here, et cetera. But it's having an old house in a historic district comes with benefits and burdens, and you get the benefit of having your property protected by virtue of other properties not being damaged by errant owners, and you're suffering the burden here by not being able to do exactly what you want to with the house, assuming the commission prevents it. So I'm going to vote no, and I do it sadly because I want to see people happy with their homes. And I've been in that house before. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. You will have a showplace on your hands at some point. I haven't been in it recently, so I don't know what it looks like now, but it has beautiful structure and beautiful features, and it's a place that you can be very proud of. I'm sorry that you want to treat the outside differently than it is now, but the commission is here to uphold a larger interest, and that's just what our jobs are. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? Did you want to respond?
So it's no longer a suggestion at this point.
it's a suggestion to us, and
Well,
I guess
it's a
we're
vote.
free-
Not voting.
We're
to-
speaking, Neil speaks for himself, I've spoken for myself. It's been quiet at that end, and there'll be a vote, essentially.
I guess the response is just, again, why discriminate against us when there are dozens of houses within a small range that it's been approved for?
I don't think it was a discrimination, and it's
No.
like they said down there that when those were done, you can't trace back when those were done and when those were okayed, or even if this body was in existence when that happened, or any of this panel was on there at that time. So we don't sit and discriminate against anyone up here, no matter what.
And
We're here to, no, we're just here to, protect Central Gardens and the other historic districts.
But then again, if you go to the point just above the one that he keeps pointing out in C and B, it is completely in keeping with other houses in the neighborhood of the same age to have painted brick, so it precedes the point C. It just seems like it's a lot more open to subjective interpretation than this C point that he keeps pointing out. But just prior to that, B says to paint our house the way we want to is very much in keeping with this historic neighborhood and its surrounding homes. So why put preference on point C as opposed to point B, especially against the homeowner's wishes? We're the ones who live in the home, and we have the support of many of our neighbors. It just seems sort of mean and discriminatory.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody want to say anything else?
I wanted to say congratulations on purchasing your home on South Belvedere. South Belvedere, or Belvedere Boulevard in general, in Central Gardens is known nationally across the nation as a beautiful neighborhood streetscape. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Also wanted to say that as the body of the Landmarks Commission, we're basically up here to follow the guidelines, the preservation philosophy for each of the individual neighborhoods. The neighbors got together to say they want it for their neighborhoods. We're also up here to encourage the treatment and careful preservation of properties, homes, buildings within those neighborhoods. And ideally, for them to be preserved so that current generation, future generations, and previous generations past can enjoy and live in those homes. whether they raise families or it's a transition or whatever. I just wanted to say that the concern is discriminating has been used several times. And if we follow the guidelines of what was put in place, and if we were appointed up here to follow those guidelines, I just am uncomfortable with discrimination being used so frequently when loosely, when that's just not, that's unfair to us because we're from different neighborhoods. This is not just a body from one neighborhood. So I think we have to be very careful and cautious when we use the term discrimination so freely, particularly with how things are right now in the United States.
Well, and we also look at the project. We honestly don't know very many people. There's a few people in this room that we do know, but I personally do not know you personally, so there's no discrimination against you. It's what we're looking at as far as we're trying to uphold as far as this particular, we're looking at that house. We're not looking at you to discriminate against you as individuals. Because we don't know you to be able to formulate an opinion of anything.
Also, there's plenty of cases where people, I don't know what they did in the case of the other homes, but we talk about this very often. There's plenty of people that do things and ask for forgiveness. Then they backpedal and backtrack it. So I don't know if that's the case with the other homes. I wasn't on the board when that happened. And I don't know if anybody else was when they painted their brick homes. But it is very possible it was a case of asking for forgiveness instead of permission. So I would take that into consideration as well. Or you should take that into consideration as well.
So as far as the definition of discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. So this seems to be discrimination or prejudicial treatment of a thing, this house, and the basis is on the age. And again, I think the term's used appropriately because there are many other houses, which are things, in this neighborhood, very close vicinity, that were allowed to do this of the same age. And again, because for whatever reasons you say, well, it was different people and different guidelines and whatnot. But, that's what went into our decision making. It's why we wanted to do it. All of these other things or homes were allowed to, and you're saying we're not. So that's why the term prejudice seems quite appropriate. It doesn't mean just one thing. It's not based on just race or people. It can also be on things and age, if you just look at the definition of the word.
I don't think they were allowed
Madam Chair.
to. That was the point. I don't think they were allowed to. I think they did it and then said, hey, we did this, backtrack it, and approve it.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that I think we've extended beyond the allowed time. The commission can vote to extend the time even further, but I believe that we would need to do that.
You need to keep in mind the district has only existed since 1990. The neighborhood has existed since 1910. And so many of these houses were painted before there was a district. Thereafter, some of them may have been painted before the guidelines restricted it. So to just be able to point to a painted house doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all.
Okay,
So
let's move forward with a motion.
I would move denial of this request to paint the home.
We have to vote in the affirmative. We have to vote up or down in the affirmative.
And we did not make a recommendation, so.
So do we have to still do it in the
Motion
motion?
should be made in the affirmative.
Correct.
I'll make a motion that the house shall remain unpainted.
Yes.
Second.
Any more discussion?
All right. Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Ms. Strong? Yes. So Ms. Strong is our new commissioner. We made a motion in the affirmative, so if you vote yes, then it will be to remain unpainted.
Yes, for unpainted.
Mr. Prosser?
Yes.
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Ms. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Chair Tucker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Is there a next step? I mean, is there an appeal process or?
We can get with you afterward and talk with you about that, yes.
Okay. Next is MLC 20011, 1656 Carr Avenue, Central Gardens Historic District. Could you come forward, please? In this case, take a seat. State your names.
Janice Pawanka.
Aaron Ramage,
Okay, and your address?
1656 Carr Avenue.
Okay, both. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, have y'all read the staff report?
Yes.
Are you in agreement with the staff report?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to see the staff report? Okay. Okay, then I think we can move forward.
Make a motion.
Any kind of questions to the people, or we good? A motion?
What was the staff recommendation? Simply approval?
Approve. And it's approved if you look from Central Gardens and, okay. Call for a motion?
I'd like to submit a motion to approve MLC case 20-011.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call, any discussion? For a vote?
All right. Mr. Prosser?
Yes.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Ms. Boyd?
Yes.
Chair Tucker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Lastly? Are they here? Okay. Okay. MLC 20013, 1810 Netherwood Avenue, Glenview Historic District. I'm good. Oh, see which one you can go for that one, I think.
Thank you.
State your name.
Brenda Salamito Baser, Salamito Land Planning, 1779 Kirby Parkway, Memphis.
Okay. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have you read the staff report?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you good with the recommendations?
Mostly.
Okay.
Mostly, I think we have one issue, and I think we kind of figure out how you feel about painting brick. We have that, but my client is here with us today, and
Uh-oh. Here, let's swear him in as well.
I'm Brad Rainey,
And your address?
2432 Harding Drive, Memphis.
Okay. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
thank you. The property in the Glenview Historic District, Mr. Rainey has recently purchased. He is a home builder.
I think so. Does everybody want, did y'all want a staff report? Okay, sorry.
Sorry, okay. Mr. Rainey is a home builder, former land use
No, we're
control
gonna let
board
them
member.
go to the staff report.
Oh, you are? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Clark Sheepdiggs, Office of Planning and Development. So this request is for 1810 Netherwood Avenue in the Glenview Historic District. The request is for exterior alterations to paint existing unpainted brick, replace the front door, and install a new upstairs front window. The applicant is Mid-South Affordable Housing Solutions. The representative is Salamito Land Planning, and staff recommends approval with one condition. So on the screen, you'll see an aerial view of the property. It's currently zoned R6. These are photos provided by the applicant of the existing property. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the existing front window to be replaced. You'll see the existing front door as well to be replaced, and the existing condition of the brick exterior. So these are closer up photos of the actual brick that will be painted. And these are the proposed paint colors for the brick and siding, the trim, and the front door. So this project meets the majority of the design guidelines. The exceptions are with respect to the painting of the unpainted brick. So the guidelines are fairly specific, stating that the covering of original facades should not be, or that covering original facades conceals particular details and interrupts the visual continuity of the street. So the proposal to paint or cover the existing facade material would not meet this criteria. In addition, the guidelines state that brick or stone, which was not painted originally, should not be painted, and the applicant is proposing to paint over the brick that was not painted originally, so again, does not meet this particular criteria. With respect to the front door replacement and the window replacement, staff found that the majority of the guidelines were met once again. However, the exception may be with regard to the proposed materials for the window replacement. So the guidelines state that when a replacement is necessary, a style that is found on similar structures in the area should be used, and that a replacement window or door should be wood and should match those seen on the house traditionally. The door itself is the proposed door will be wood, as is the original. However, the proposed upstairs front window replacement material would be vinyl under the current proposal, and section endpoint 38 of the guidelines state that vinyl clad windows are acceptable when they appear similar in scale, proportion, and finish to wood windows. So the project as proposed may actually be meeting this requirement. So with that, staff recommends approval with one condition, the sole condition being that the existing brick and stone exterior shall remain unpainted.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for staff?
Is the window in the gable that's being proposed to be replaced the original window?
Yes.
Doesn't look like an original to me, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
I'm about 95% positive it's not an original window because it's an aluminum mill finish window.
Yeah, right. It
Somebody
looks
put a room upstairs and that window that's in there does not meet legal egress. So the reason besides it not being a very attractive mill finish window, I'd like to get a legal egress out of the upstairs.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Is the intention to paint the brick and the stonework, or just the brick?
No, just the brick.
Okay. Did we address the awning at all? Did we address that?
It's gone.
It's no longer
Okay,
present.
that's okay. Okay.
Anybody else have for staff? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. The property, Mr. Rainey bought the property recently. Mr. Rainey was a former member of the Land Use Control Board, home builder and developer for many, many years here in Memphis and Shelby County and surrounding areas, and has been renovating homes. And the Glenview area, and this home in particular, I think fell way below the threshold of being in disrepair. I think it was a rental property for a number of years, and I think you had people living in animalistic type conditions in this home, that it was people going in hazmat suits, having to remove carpet and things in the home. The restoration process fully intended to restore the architectural features. If you notice one of the, I'm not really sure what you call the little pointy things, but up on the gable by that roof, you can see it's missing. That's going to be replaced. The window will be consistent with the time period and meet the guidelines. The door will meet the guidelines. And notwithstanding the proliferation of painted homes in the Glenview area, They're all attractive. I think all of these homes that are being renovated and redone, they're all very, very nice. The ones unpainted are also very, very nice. But we took pictures of over 38 homes that just had painted the brick, not counting the ones that had painted the stone. This house, you might be able to tell, they painted the limestone trim right there on the side.
Until that separates the stone from the brick.
That line right through there, that has been painted. So, and it would be interesting to see, you know, you don't know when it's been done, you don't know how long, whether they've asked forgiveness or got permission. Even 2 of the homes on the National Register list are fully painted. So when we look at a district like any district, any historic district that has such a proliferation of nonconformities, how do we handle that with property owners? I think this is a separate case from the Central Gardens case. It's kind of completely different, but in trying to make the best home value for the neighborhood, to make the best decision to bring it up from nothing for the neighborhood. So parts of those reasons are why we would like to paint the house, not to be disrespectful of the historic guidelines. I don't see that if it was painted the brick color, how that would necessarily be an improvement. So part of our rationale, and I'll let Brad answer any other questions that we may have.
So a little bit of backstory about Glenview. It was fast and loose because no one cared. Okay, so the residents cared, but then there were new people that came in that did not care. And there was not a lot of oversight. There was not a lot of regulation. There was a house that was purple. I wanted to set it on fire every time I drove past it. I don't know who okayed that. Somebody course corrected it finally. But now people are starting to look, and people are starting to care more about the neighborhood. New people, I should say. The people that existed already cared for the most part. So that's where that comes in. But on the other side of that is the fact that the homes that with painted brick, including mine, look nice. They did a good job. It is hard to maintain. You cannot unring the bell, but for the most part, they look nice. I don't really have an objection to it. I want to have an objection to it, but I don't, because they've done a good job in painting it. It does buck the rules, however, so that therein lies the conflict. And I would like to see the colors again. It's not purple, is it?
No.
Just kidding.
They're off a historic color chart, appropriate to the time period. Honestly, my objective is just to make a more attractive, more marketable home. Our objective is to renovate these homes and sell them to owner occupants. I think that's the best way to stabilize a neighborhood. So it's not
rental.
I mean,
Not
my situation is entirely different personally from the other people. I'm not gonna live here. We're gonna renovate it, bring it up to code. We've already rewired the thing inside, replaced the water line, sewer line. Try to build something that'll
It's pretty much
be
gutted.
proud to own. Yeah.
It was gutted on the inside. People had
New
stolen
bathroom
everything,
upstairs,
everything
new,
out of it.
well,
I mean, there was another, just as a side note, there was another issue that a lot of the homeowners had was that there were rentals. People that rent don't invest in the well-being of a home. So, I'm okay with the, owner-occupant situation.
There was a garage, a detached garage that had collapsed in even prior to you purchasing the home. They paid to remove that, the awning that was out front gone. So keeping it,
there's actually a tree across the front.
yeah, and then you see a picture, there was a tree that fell across the front. And it is a beautiful neighborhood. It is historic. It is beautiful.
Madam Chair, can I speak to this?
Yes.
So I do appreciate, well, I guess I can't say that in good faith. I don't necessarily feel like stories about children in schools and your objectives for the house and all of that is relevant. I want to keep our conversation about the architecture. And it's simple architecture, right? So when I see this house, I see a bright mortar and I see a red brick with a little variation. I see a stone base with a lot of variation and another stone cap. And what happens, you can tell where my preference is going. Again, and I'll read the guideline. Our past case today notwithstanding, the guideline for Glenview says, brick and stone which was not painted originally should not be painted. Perhaps even more strongly worded. And I wish they all just said, don't do it, because it'd make my job a lot easier. But when we return the conversation to the architecture of this building, what happens when a building is painted in brick? It can be done tastefully, right? There are some examples of homes in every historic district in the city that are painted in brick, and if they are careful in their selection of trim, et cetera, you can drive by and say, wow, that looks great. And its paint is very seductive for a new homeowner or for a developer, and I don't mean developer disparagingly at all. I mean a person who wants to reinvent a property, whether it was the last young couple that was here or yourself. It's instant, right? It's wow, it's great. But when it goes poorly, it's one of the worst things you can do to a house. And never mind the fact that once a house is painted, do we realize that this body cannot legislate colors at all? I mean, once it's painted, you can paint it Pepto-Bismol pink, and there's nothing we can do about it. So there's an example of a house at the corner of North Parkway and East Parkway that was recently painted. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. And I hope nobody in this room had anything to do with it. I mean, I almost had a wreck the first time I saw it. I think we have an obligation to respect the guideline. And again, it's a slippery slope to say, well, what about this and what about that? And I'm maybe passing the buck here, but I don't control that. I didn't control it, didn't vote on it. Don't want to talk about it in a way. To me, it's pretty cut and dry. And I want to end on a positive. My personal comments end on a positive. Thank you for your interest in this property and your investment in it.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to speak?
Well, sir, we understand the guidelines. We understand
Well, wait.
the law. Oh, okay, sorry.
I think the guidelines make the paint issue very easy. I think that the window ought to be replaced, and I think you ought to choose a style that's consistent with the neighborhood and not just a one-over-one.
It's a 4-light window.
All right. And I don't know enough about the door to have an opinion other than it's okay with
It's
staff.
as close as I can find them. It's as close as I can find to what's there.
All right, so, that's all I have to say. I think this, given the guidelines here and given what we just did with the last application, I think that the path here is pretty clear, at least it is for me.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I think Natasha has one more.
I wanted to say that I think the brick as it is a beautiful color, and when you look at the juxtaposition between the foundation or the stonework on the foundation, I had the opportunity to look at it in person, and I think you lose that when you paint, because right now, when you look at it in person, and once it's cleaned up carefully in a nice way, that's a beautiful feature or asset for the house. And I know there are beautiful homes that have been painted or brick homes that have been painted, but as was mentioned, sometimes the paint jobs are not always done correctly. And also the trend of painting, we can sometimes maybe think of this as a trend of painting brick, but you also again have to look at future homeowners, and it's an unnecessary maintenance issue or perpetual cost. And the way the brick is and the stonework or the foundation of that, in my opinion, I think it's best to leave it unpainted, and I think with the renovations that are being done to the home, I think the home will sell.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from, okay, you have 2 minutes to rebuttal.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I just wanted to say, we certainly understand the guidelines and the conditions and the rationale for the regulations, and all of that is based on national standards. So we do understand that. I think each district is unique, and sometimes national standards can't necessarily be applied across the board without taking certain cases on a case-by-case basis. I think, and you can kind of see this particular structure it's just barely been saved, I think. I mean, outside of it, but the inside of it is just, it was unlivable. And we will respect your wishes, but I think taking this on a case-by-case basis relative to context and compatibility, and also with regard to the ability to make the repair in the mortar and for it to still be attractive. So there's always some questions of how that will turn out, but we certainly respect your opinions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I have a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendations of staff, along with the one condition for MLC 20-013, 1810 Netherwood Avenue.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Ms. Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Prosser?
Yes.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Norcross?
Yes.
Chair Tucker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
We appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, new business, I have one. We'd like to introduce our new commissioner, Natasha Strong. And did you want to?
I did, and I do apologize too. At the beginning, I was going to recognize you. And so our newest commissioner, Natasha Strong, she has been an advocate in the Vecca neighborhood for a long time and just other community organizations, including Building Memphis. And so we're happy to have you here, and we appreciate all your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did
Welcome.
want to say anything, or you good? Okay, do you have any other business?
No, ma'am.
Okay, the next meeting is Thursday, March 26, 2020. Can I call for an adjournment? Anybody want to say? Go for it. Okay.
Not done today.
Good to see you, sir.